Hi, welcome to Schofield Farm and Merry Christmas. Today I'm going to teach you how to make my very favorite Christmas cookie. I will butcher the name. Okay, it's spelled Krumkake. I always say Krumkake, but it's not. I'm sure it's totally different because it's Norwegian. My grandma on my mom's side of the family is 100% Norwegian, so a lot of our Christmas cookie traditions come from her. And this is the one that I always make. It has a beautiful iron. It uses tons of butter, which is super Norwegian. And it tastes kind of like a cookie ice cream cone. I don't know, I love it. It has cardamom, which is my very favorite spice. It's super simple. I'll put the recipe down in the description below, and I'm gonna show you how I do it. I'm making a quadruple batch. So what I'm doing is 4 times what you would do for just a single batch. Maybe you'll try this cookie next year. I don't know if I'll post this in time for you to do it this year, but it doesn't have to be Christmas time. It can be any time of the year. It's just our special Christmas tradition. The first thing you need to know about this recipe is you want to melt your butter and then let the melted butter cool. That's pretty important. It uses a lot of eggs. Just one batch of the recipe is 4 eggs. I did 4 batches, that's 16. You want to beat the sugar and the eggs together in the mixer. Since I quadrupled the recipe, I ended up using 4 cups of cane sugar. I like the organic cane sugar from Costco for this. We use coconut sugar for most of our baking needs. We also use maple syrup. We use honey from our backyard. But this cookie, I feel like the other things change the flavor, so I stick with the organic cane sugar. Plus, when I'm making them for my grandma, and she has a certain way, she grew up with them for 94 years, you use the sugar she likes. All right, I just beat these. Pretty simple and pretty straightforward. After you thoroughly beat the sugar and the eggs, you pour the cooled, melted butter into the mixer. Now, as I said, I quadrupled the recipe, so I used a whole pound of butter, but one recipe only calls for half a cup of butter. Next, I add the spices. The 2 spices that I use in this recipe are vanilla and cardamom. Now, I love cardamom. Ground cardamom is one of my favorite spices to use in anything. It's so delicious. The vanilla we're using right now is the vanilla we got in Mexico. My sister brought this back for me after a trip she took me. We've actually got this vanilla in Mexico a couple times. I do make my own vanilla with vodka and vanilla beans, but this one has a especially rich flavor, and I wanted it in this cookie. Next, I sift together the cornstarch and the flour. This recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. I quadrupled the recipe, so I used 8. It also calls for 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. We do not eat gluten in our house. We have 4 kids who are gluten-free, so everything I bake or cook in our house is gluten-free. We make our own gluten-free flour mix, which I should make a video on at a later time. But it is balanced so that it will be a 1-for-1 sub in any recipe that we use. Ideally, for gluten-free baking, you would use a food scale. The recipe I use does not use weighed measurements, so I spoon the flour into the cup just to get it more accurate, especially gluten-free flour. If you just put your cup measurement into the jar, you will get it wrong and it won't turn out quite right. I love this recipe. It's super simple. It only has 7 ingredients and it's pretty quick to put together. What actually takes longer in making these cookies is the actual cooking of them 2 at a time on the iron, which we'll get to in just a minute. Now, Now, sifting flour can feel a little tedious and unnecessary, but really when you're doing a recipe like this, you don't want any clumps in the batter. It makes for a nice fine texture, and the flour and the cornstarch mix in much more evenly. Just look at that nice, light, fluffy, fine texture. That's going to make very nice cookies. I mix the flour in on low and I scoop it in basically 1/2 of a cup at a time, just so we don't get a big flurry of flour in my kitchen. I mix it until it is thoroughly mixed and it looks like a nice batter. Almost more like a pancake batter in consistency when it's finished. This is what your batter will look like. You obviously want to scrape down the sides to get any extra flour thoroughly incorporated and mix till it is completely one. Now this is what the iron looks like that you make these on. It has a nice pretty print to it. And some people make pizzelles on this and keep them flat. That is a different country's culture. Norwegian culture is you actually take the cookie and you shape it around a cone to make a nice cone shape. Now I think one of the hardest things about this cookie is getting the timing down for how long it cooks. It feels like it goes from not cooked enough to overbaked quite suddenly. I like to use a glove to help protect my hands from burning because I burn myself a lot. Now I like to get these off with a knife and then I wrap them around the cone and I hold them just for a few seconds. You have to be kind of fast because there are 2 cookies on the iron and one might get overcooked if you hold it too long for the other cookie. I put about a tablespoon of batter kind of near the top edge of the center of the iron because it's slightly angled and it will kind of drip down until you close it. I will often drink hot drinks while I wait because there's a lot of waiting in making these cookies. I often tend to burn my hands and it takes a while to wait for this. Like sometimes you're waiting and you think maybe the steam is stopped and you'll lift it up and they're not quite done. Other times you wait till the steam has stopped and they are overdone. The overdone ones are the ones we usually snack on. Here is one that got lifted. Almost right. Krumkake. I looked it up. I looked it up online. In Norwegian you say krumkake. It's actually a crumb cake. It means curved cake. That's all it means. It's not really a cake, it's a cookie. But that's what they are, and they're my favorite. Let me show you. They are so beautiful. Oh, they are so delicious. They're not too sweet. They're like the perfect cookie for tea or coffee. Oh, they are so good. You can fill them with like jam or whipped cream, dip them in chocolate. I like them just how they are. Simple and perfect. Sometimes when I put the batter on, I time it just right and get them the perfect color. It feels like every time is trying to get this sweet spot. I tried rolling the cookies and then resting them against the drying rack, and I feel like it helped a little bit. See, you can see how my color variety kind of changes. They're very hard to predict and get uniform. I often use a butter knife just to separate the cookies and to lift them and get them right onto my cone maker. Making krumkakes is a long, slow process. Right here, 3 drying racks full, and I still have a lot of batter left, but that's because I'm making 4 batches. I'm going to put them in these cookie trays I've saved over the years. I put wax paper inside, and then I stack them the best I can. That keeps them airtight. Well, not really airtight, but enough airtight that they stay crisp. One year I was trying to make them the same time I was making my beef stew that I make for Christmas dinner every year, and they wouldn't harden up. And I found out it was because there's too much moisture in the air with the beef stew on the stove all day. So now I always make them 2 completely different days. I store them in the tins in a different room just to make sure we don't have any softening of the cookies, because these cookies are the very best when they're super crisp. These cookies can be quite a commitment to make between the hot iron where I get burns on my hands, shaping them, and just the slow nature of them. But they're so worth it. I'm telling you, they're one of the best tasting cookies I have ever had. These 4 batches took me about 4 hours. If I made just one simple batch just to have at home on a regular occasion, maybe a birthday or for a Saturday or a weekend, it would be much faster. I would say it'd be about an hour. They're definitely worth it, and I would love for you to try them and let me know what you think. Thanks for joining me in my homestead kitchen, and have a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year. I'll see you soon.